Everybody, welcome to Earth Frequency. Today I want to show you some awesome truth-seeking channels. Please take a second to like, share, and subscribe. These are some awesome channels which I have been watching that have really helped me on the path of seeking truth and enlightenment. Okay, the first one I'd like to show you is Paul Cook.
Easy Tigers, I hope everyone is fine and dandy. Big up everyone that supported me, one love to you as well. Right, and another one, Jack Fiddler. Thanks for sending me this information, mate, because it just sort of connected some dots. Now, I was in Portsmouth a few weeks back with a few friends, and we come across these cannons, and I was looking, and we was all scratching our heads saying, these cannot be cannons, they don't look like they've been shot out of. Well. Let's have a little looky-wooky, shall we? Shall we have a look at these modern mechanics? This is an electric cannon that uses no gunpowder. Now that, to me, answers why these cannons look like they've not been shot out of at all. Now let's have a little read up. So it says, silent guns sending their whistling messengers of death into the sky at speeds far beyond those attained by powder-driven shells. Seems likely for the next war. Using for propulsion magnetic fields so powerful that when they are short-circuited they produce miniature earthquakes. There's a doctor at the University in Cavendish of Cambridge in England. In his attempt to disrupt the atom, he produced a magnetic field so powerful that they explode coils that produce them. This man has finally revealed the secret of the magnetic gun so long anticipated by ballistic experts. The doctor accomplishes the electric firing of the shells by short-circuiting powerful dynamos for periods of 1/100 of a second. Another English experimenter seeking the same thing produces ultra-magnetic waves with a more simpler apparatus, simply charging electrostatic condensers and permits them to discharge their powerful currents into specially made coils immersed in oil baths. Here also magnetic fields so powerful that they tear the coils to pieces have been produced. So great that the magnetic fields that they are capable of pulling iron nails out of shoes. While the magnetic effects produced by both of the experimenters are very short duration, they could be employed to impart their terrible energy to steel shells. The time limit, which cannot exceed 1/100 of a second, is imposed because of the powerful current used. If these currents were permitted to flow through a wire greater of the period of time, the wire would melt and temperatures would be greater existing and some of the hottest stars would be produced. To produce a magnetic gun, a silent Big Bertha, it will only be necessary to arrange a series of powerful coils within the gun barrel. Each coil will have its own generator, and the shell advancing through the barrel will automatically energize the coil just ahead of it. By the time the shell reaches the end of the barrel, it will have attained a speed far in excess of the speeds now attainable with even the highest explosives known. In the entire absence of internal pressure, these guns may be made of ordinary iron or even purely non-magnetic materials. The magnetic explosion will be initiated by the simple closing of a switch, which will energize the first coil and snatch the shell from the breech in the first leg of its journey of destruction. Now, given that said, that makes a lot of sense to why a lot of these cannons don't look like they've been through war, because they haven't had explosives in them. And another thing that I'm thinking is there something to do with a chemical reaction caused by the electromagnetic field to cause some of these cannons to turn a green colour? But we'll have a look at that in a minute. Just want to show you these, because these did not have whatsoever did they have gunpowder in them. And if you think about it, I'm going to show you now. If there was gunpowder in this specific cannon, right, where would you load the gunpowder? Because this thread here doesn't have a hole through it. It's not hollow. You can't put anything through it. So once you screw that thread into the other part of the thread, and it's now one solid piece, you only have access to the front of the gun where you put the cannonball. So it don't make no sense. Either you put the gunpowder at the front, but then there'd be no point in screwing on the back, so it don't make no sense. Given that said, if they're using electromagnetic propulsion, it wouldn't matter that the thread was in the way, would it? I digress. So they're doing the magnetic propulsion at the back, and it's creating electromagnetic field, causing the ball to shoot out. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. Very interesting, hey? And like I said, it's very interesting that some of these cannons are green and some of them are just war-torn metallic, rusty colours, you know? But we're going to have a look at this now anyway. We're going to zoom in a little bit on this oxidizing colour.
This next one is the awesome John Levi. Check this out.
Probably channels that know what they're going to talk about, have premeditated their thoughts, taking the anxiety out of a recording. I am not one of those creators, but I do have a few subjects picked out for us today. And most importantly, the subject will deal with the mud flood. Very grassroots in this community. One of the starting points for this rabbit hole. I hope you're all doing well. Thanks for joining me, and welcome. So here, since I'm here, let's discuss this photo. Recently, in a video, I had read an essay by Gary Shunung, the creator of the Old Earth Ruins series that we examine, and he had mentioned that these ruins found on Easter Island may have actually have been columns supporting a larger structure, and what we see carved on the top may have just been done by a primitive people inheriting this region after a reset. And here I found such a picture, and what really caught my eye was this structure. While everybody is staring at the statue itself, more interesting is this perfect structure underneath, very square, that seems to have been unearthed. And just as Gary had suggested, I do believe this may be a supporting column for what may have been a massive structure. Perhaps this seeming mountain behind here was also part of it, with its supposed caves really having the same color, seeming to be made up of the same stone. And when you consider everything's buried, and the primitives would have had no such doing in what we see underground here, I think Gary makes an excellent point. These statues or carvings look like shit for the old world and what we typically look at. I've never been impressed with the statues at Easter Island, but let me know what you think. Again, these were the thoughts of Gary Shunung. And of course, we've been examining the mud flood for years now. When we first started down this rabbit hole, there was very little available. And if you would punch in mud flood in a search engine, you wouldn't find what you were looking for, at least in our community. And today I've just punched in mud flood in the search engine, and very exciting to see how much pops up that's completely relevant to our research. And what does one think when looking at these images, who hasn't been discussing it for years as we have? Perhaps nothing. Perhaps the mind doesn't allow one to venture too far. Here, for example, we can see one of my pictures that I took of the Salt Lake City Temple while being renovated. And it's nice to have the heavy equipment next to the building just to give you an idea of how massive this is. We're looking at 2 stories below ground level, and construction, we are told, beginning with horse and wagon in the 1850s. Here, I believe this is in New York City or possibly New Jersey. And what in the hell happened here? Of course, we've looked at this picture many times before, but have we really sat and discussed it? Really? In my opinion, no more pictures are necessary until this can be explained. Of course, there were buildings on the other side here, and they've just demolished it, probably getting ready to put a parking lot in underground. And here is what excavation has revealed. And here, people don't even realize they're driving on old buildings. How old is this? And clearly older than the New America. The New America has no idea what lies under its feet, always discovering new tunnels and passageways. It's a constant. Every city throughout the realm having an entire city underneath it. And it simply makes no sense. No good reason could be given. Again, these people in their apartments living on top of ancient buildings, bricked up windows, rotting metal, and this is the foundation. Many homes having crawl spaces, but oftentimes flooded with earth. And what explanation is given? None. Not here in America, not in Paris, not in Russia. Here we can see the Polytechnic Museum, brick with a weathered facade like it's been through hell, and much of the building underground. And I believe the Russians brought us the mud flood idea. And I believe it was this building that suddenly woke the people up in the alternative Russian history community. And once we saw it, we began to see it everywhere. I was looking for any construction information about this Polytechnic Museum, and there's very little. The origins of the museum go back to 1872, when they had an exhibition. Very similar story to the explanation for many of these wondrous buildings. An exhibition, a World's Fair, and even recently, in a past video, we examined a Russian communist fair that never really happened, but was completely built out. And this, in fact, was part of that. Here we can see the Polytechnic Museum, and Philip Druzinin made many videos on this subject, walking around the perimeter. And so, if they did build this in the 1870s, even though they don't even really tell us it was built, why did they bury the building?
This next one is New Earth channel. I really love this channel.
Вообще, не по-человечески как-то все. Ну разве так можно? Кричать, 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 кричать. Ну, и пицца, раз, два.
Hello. Some 30-40 years ago, Vyacheslav Krisheninikov came to this earth to warn us that we are the generation which will take part in the most dramatic chapter of the shift of ages. And he left very practical and detailed prophecies for those who will decide to remain loyal to the way of light during this very interesting transition. 6 years ago, I made a video with the highlights of his prophecies, and I said, well, watch out in case something like this happens. But now, since 1 year, it has become crystal clear that he is a true prophet. That's why I revisited the material left by him and found out lots of more interesting stuff, which will be hopefully presented in the future videos. This will be kind of introduction, kind of a general timeline of the events, more details about which you will hear, hopefully, in the upcoming series with his prophecies. In terms of the timing of the apocalyptic events, when to expect them, he said, "I will die when I am 11, but my mother will live long enough to the time of the Antichrist." As of the end of the last year, 2020, the age of his mother was 65. He said that they will prepare meticulously for many, many long years, but when they unleash their plan, it will all start happening very, very fast. They will unleash the sicknesses they have prepared for us and will start blowing up buildings and impose absolute control on practically almost everything besides the own people of the Lord, of course, in the name of keeping the people secure from the dacoits, you know. The segregation between the noble souls and those who will consent to bowing down to the devils will become pretty much obvious from the very beginning of the epic drama, because the parasitic entities will make it simply impossible for the noble souls to remain in the society as we know it. Police will be patrolling everywhere, demanding all kinds of papers, the precursors of the mark of the donkey, and there will be no way that the noble souls will remain in the cities, even in the initial stage. What will be their fate? Vyacheslav said that in the beginning, there will be an initial period when they will feel kind of lonely and abandoned when they realize that there isn't much of us actually. But this will be a relatively short period compared to the duration of the entire drama, because later on they will see for themselves that God will start personally helping them. In the beginning, they will find themselves alone or in small groups in some sort of remote places. Please note that I am not adjusting this story to make it fit somewhat better the current situation. It sounds almost like reading the news. No, I'm not changing even 1%. And in the end of this video, I will provide link to the Russian sources where you can see for yourself that these are many years old prophecies, not recorded recently, and this is exactly what his mother said in front of the camera many years ago. What she recorded after he passed away is the main source of his prophecies. They had like an official diary they were writing, him and her, while he was still alive, and those were the official prophecies that we were supposed to get everything very detailed, but that disappeared mysteriously.
This next one is Mind Unveiled, another awesome channel.
In order to firmly grasp the ideas presented, this is what you will need to know. Mainstream history, alternative histories like Atlantis, Lemuria, religious doctrines, the history of the occult and astrotheology, and the history of Rome and Christianity.
There's been a lot of hype around the Tartaria conspiracy lately, and naturally there's a lot of confusion surrounding it. This video is really an attempt to develop the theory further. So, let's type in Tartaria in Google and see what we find. If you look on Wikipedia, the first result, it will show you a map from the 1800s, 1806. Keep that in mind for later. Now on this map, Tartary is just an Asiatic landmass, with city names that are based off Mongolian or Chinese. And where we see Russia and China, this is where Great Tartaria once existed. Let me show you a map from the 1600s. Let's notice how this is much different. We see Great Tartaria. Let's also notice the etymology change of all the cities. It's no longer a Mongolian empire, it's something else, maybe pre-Russian? Also notice this, California is an island? Very interesting. Wikipedia's explanation is it's a messaging error. Considering how high of an art cartography was, I find that hard to believe. As far-fetched as the following information may seem, I'm going to ask you just to follow down this path. Some people are saying that Tartaria is some kind of distraction, but from what? And is this theory any more of a distraction than Netflix and video games? Do you honestly feel satisfied with the history they teach you in schools and churches? I understand that most of you are believers of evolution and Big Bang Theory, but let's just explore a very different alternative to conventional history. I don't know everything about the past. I wasn't there. Nobody was, as far as we know. Science likes to think it has all the answers, yet scientists still can't tell us how consciousness came to be, the connection between consciousness and matter, and why the hell we're all here. My goal is just to get the message out there to those who are genuinely curious about what's going on in this life. It's an understatement to say that humanity is lost.
It's been pointed out by many historians that humanity is much older than we have been told. It's possible that civilization goes back millions of years, and we could be in some kind of cycle. What's clear is, advanced civilizations did exist in the past. If the monuments don't convince you, consider the myths and legends about gods having to deliver culture-important knowledge. There are hundreds of books written on Atlantis because it was a real place.
The first story we really hear of this is from Plato, and in Critias is telling Socrates a story. He says, "Look, Socrates, I got this crazy story that this wise sage named Solon told my great-grandfather, who was also named Critias. But my grandfather told me the story when I was 10. My grandfather started by saying how wise Solon was and that he was one of the wise 7 sages. And he, Grandfather Critias, was going to some poetry youth meetup. And there Solon, his teacher, is trying to tell a story about the greatest achievement that the Athenians ever did. But he says, and which ought to have been the most famous, but through the lapse of time and the destruction of the actors, it has not come down to us." I thought Socrates was an Athenian. Socrates is hearing this story from a young man named Critias. Critias is relaying a story he was told at age 10 by his grandfather, who, when he was young, was told this story by Solon the sage. Confusing, right? Well, it's meant to be. So Solon is now starting the story saying, basically, "Yes, we did something really great, but you don't know about it, young Critias, because these actors have been destroyed through a lapse of time." Okay, Solon continues telling Critias about a certain district in Egypt named Sais, and how they had a great connection with the Athenians at this time. So Solon was taking a trip there, and he was received with great honor, and he started a conversation with the priest of Egypt on past human antiquity, or basically ancient history. Now it says that Solon and none of the other Hellenes had nothing to say on the matter, and I think when Plato was writing this, he was implying that the priest didn't really want to talk about it that much. They were just listening to see what they knew, and at the end of the conversation, they didn't know anything, the Hellenes. They were clueless. So it goes on to say that on another occasion, Solon asked the priest again. And here is what I'm trying to show you guys. Solon was trying to pester the priest. It was like trying to show the priest his outstanding knowledge so the priest would talk about what they knew. Why? Because Solon knew that the Egyptians' priests were much, much wiser. So Solon tried to impress them, talking about his knowledge of Pharonius, who is called the first man, and about Niobe. Now I'm going to take a little break here because I want to show you something.
Okay, everybody, I hope you enjoyed that. One love, peace, and harmony. I'll have another video with some more awesome channels for you. Please take a second to like, share, and subscribe.